do is just tell you a little bit about me, kind of a brief journey through my career, and then I'm probably easy just to maybe answer some questions that you might have and just kind of have a chat like that. As you can see by all of these masks around, I have an association with Trestle Theatre Company, which I think is probably the main reason why you want to invite me here to talk to me. So I was 5 years as Trestle Associate Director, and I still work with them a lot. In fact, I'm working all day for them tomorrow. But basically, I started as an actor, and I was an actor for about 12 years. And what I did was I was incredibly reactive to anything that went on. I had no plan whatsoever when I was younger. And so, as soon as I left drama school, I went and ran a theatre company in Belfast with some friends of mine from the National Youth Theatre. And with sort of young bravado, we became incredibly successful within about 2 years, and putting on some fantastic shows. And I was acting there, but also that's when I kind of first started to direct as well. So I directed some Pinter pieces actually. And we were based in a really tough community in the Ardoyne in Belfast, if anyone knows that area. A really strong but hard community, who weren't particularly open to having English people there, shall we say. But me and my friends were taken in fantastically by the community, and I think that was for me one of the first lessons in how art or theatre or any kind of process like that can really kind of cross those sort of borders, because we were bringing some fantastic theatre to their communities, and they were incredibly grateful for it. But being young, we actually got a load of money, and then we spent it before we actually got it, and the company folded. That's what you do when you're young. You have no idea about how to run a theatre company. And so then I went off to Europe, and I worked in Paris as an actor for many years, and in Germany, and from Germany I toured all over Europe and Southeast Asia, and had an incredible time, having lots and lots of fun. And then came back here, and I kind of did the usual rep stuff, and I worked at Sheffield Crucible and West Yorkshire Playhouse, all the kind of the big regional theatres, and kind of having a fantastic time. But then it just kind of struck me that actually I was feeling quite empty, really. And what I really wanted to do was direct, but not only direct, but actually for the work that I was creating was involved in to have a lot more meaning than it just being a predominantly kind of quite white middle class audience, especially when I was working at Chichester Festival Theatre, if any of you know it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all, and it's one of those things that's kind of talked about so much, that a theatre audience is predominantly white and middle class. For me, that's absolutely fine, as long as other people are also being able to be included in that process. But I felt that I wanted more from the work that I was doing, so I decided to turn to directing, and also becoming a practitioner, which in those days, sort of 15 years ago, was kind of quite a new concept, really. It was at the time when regional theatres and other companies were really just starting to do the kind of participation work, which is now hugely embedded in all those kind of regional theatres. And to having education departments and all that sort of thing. And especially I worked for the National Youth Theatre, and they did absolutely none of that work whatsoever. It was a totally elitist organisation, which was what it was a specialist, and that's what it was good at. It still is very good at, getting the best talent there is and nurturing that talent. But people were kind of nudging them and saying, actually, you're not very inclusive, and there's a lot of people who would love to work with you but can't. So myself and a few other people associated with the National Youth Theatre started their outreach wing, and we started to do a lot of work in communities, and it's now a huge part of their work, as is that kind of work all over the country, really. So while I was making the transition to being a kind of a director and a practitioner, I wasn't getting that much work. It was intermittent. And I turned to another one of my passions, which was photography, and I worked at the Photographers Gallery in London, which is the top photography gallery in Europe, really. And I worked there as setting up exhibitions. And it's kind of nothing really to do with my journey as an actor or director, but it taught me a huge amount about the creative process, and I was having the immense pleasure of working with some of the world's greatest photographers and I was supposed to be just hanging their pictures, but I'd also take the opportunity to say, so how did you, come across the work making this image, and what's your technique, and what's your methodology, and how are you creative, and they were also completely open to, obviously, to having these conversations. So I've always been kind of also interested much more in the creative process, which has led me to where I am now, which I'll talk about in a minute, as Director of Creativity Works, but also into education. I'm very passionate about actor training. One of my ex-students is back there. But then, so I decided I needed, after this very short-term strategy, to have a long-term strategy. So about 10 years ago, I decided I want to work with the institutions and work in buildings and really make a difference from the inside. So I became the Youth Theatre Director at the Theatre Royal Plymouth, which I don't know if any of you know it, but to me is probably the best regional theatre in the country. It's an astonishing place. It has something like, this is when I was there, 70% of any of the work that goes out on tour has got something to do with the Theatre Royal Plymouth nationally. It's got an incredible reach, mainly because of the genius of their chief exec in creating TR2, which was their production and education centre. So I was working in these fantastic modern buildings, absolutely fantastic facilities, and able to do brilliant work because I was developed by the artistic director there, Simon Stokes, took me under his wing and basically let me do whatever I liked. So in 3 years I directed about 14 shows, and we'd just kind of go to the people at TR2, the production centre, and say, oh, you know that gigantic set you just made for that huge tour? Can we kind of just repaint it and put it in the small studio? Yeah, sure. So we had these kind of, it was just a kind of, I developed a sort of maverick streak of just kind of getting things done. And that became sort of the biggest regional youth theatre, and I started up an adult company as well called the People's Company, which is now huge. And one of my sort of areas of specialism, I suppose, something that I'm really interested in, is a lot of people were doing youth theatre shows, and a lot of people were doing sort of adult community shows, no one was really kind of combining the two. So I developed this way of being able to create shows where you could have young people, old people, older people, everyone from the community. And it was a way of basically doing it in a kind of a pod system. And you had to have very, very good dramaturgy. So you'd have to have a kind of an overview of how the whole thing was going to eventually be put together, and you'd create bits. So you'd have a youth theatre doing a tiny little bit there, and the People's Company doing a bit there, and then another group doing a bit there, and a load of young people in care that I was working with would create something there. And then you'd put it all together in the last week, and it would seamlessly look like we've been working on it for about a year. And they became very successful as well. So I kind of got quite a reputation there for kind of creating this quite interesting work that was of very high quality. And that, again, is really important to me, because I was trying to break down the boundaries between what professional theatre was and what amateur theatre or community theatre was. And I hope that I did break down some of those boundaries. Again, it's something I'm very passionate about today, because I would say that a lot of the actors I was working with in the Young Company and the People's Company were far more talented than the actors that I'd worked with as a professional actor. Genuinely. And one of the reasons was that the training that the professional actors had knocked out their instinct. And what the kind of community actors had was instinct. They might not have had great voices, physically they might have been awkward, but there was something real and raw about them, and that really kind of like excited me. So after Theatre Royal Plymouth, I joined Trestle, and I was at Trestle for 5 years. And I continued a lot of that work to Trestle as well. So I created, we had a youth theatre already, which we kind of grew, and I created a People's Company, and we did these productions of kind of these pod productions of kind of creating stuff. And at the time, Trestle was going through a very, very interesting phase, because they are world-renowned for being a masked theatre company. But when I joined them, they'd just become unmasked. Which seems totally crazy. Why would you just throw away your USP? And the main reason they did it, is anyone from the Arts Council here? No. Was the Arts Council had basically kind of given them a steer, saying, yeah, we really love your work, but you've done it now. What are you going to do next? And so Trestle said, we haven't really done it. We're a mask theatre. That's what we do. Yeah, but you've done it now. You've got, what's next? What are you going to do next? And they said, well, we could take the masks off. Yeah, why don't you do that and see what happens? So what they did, what Emily did, who's still the artistic director there, again, a brilliant woman, and someone I'm very, very, has taken me under her wing. It's been amazing for me. But what we did, created a pedagogy around the physicality of how you use masks and translated that into physical theatre. So mask work is physical theatre. It's the essence of physical theatre, really, of movement, because it's all in the body. It has to be all in the body. The whole of your kind of communication, the whole of your character is physical and through your body. And so all we really did was kind of take those masks off. But it was the introduction of text that really baffled us. And I think it's baffled everyone who's kind of doing physical theatre and trying to do text. Frantic Assembly, I think, are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I love their incredibly exciting shows. But I sometimes get frustrated when they do the movement bit and then they do some text and then the movement bit. And maybe it's impossible to move and speak, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what we were exploring. And I associate directed 2 shows, and I directed 2 of my own shows. One which is called Burn My Heart, which was based on the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. So I went to Kenya, did a load of research there, and tried to base that very much on the kind of physical techniques that they were using and the physical storytelling that they were using. And then I did another show called The Man with the Luggage, which was very loosely based on a bizarre Ionesco play, which is totally unperformable, but worked with a brilliant writer from Liverpool. She rewrote it, and so I did lots of research on kind of Balkan music and how that affects movement and stuff like that. So what I was always trying to do, what Trestle was trying to do, was come from a really deep place of research for their physicality. But unfortunately that wasn't quite good enough for the Arts Council, and where they cut our grant by 100% in those savage cuts a few years ago. Which meant we basically couldn't do any touring work. What we could do is develop our education work. And so I started an MA, which is still the only one in the country. It's an MA in education drama, so it's an MA for drama teachers. Again, that became incredibly successful until the government put the fees up, and of course they couldn't afford to come on the MA, although it is still going. But what we were trying to do there is we found that there was this very little CPD for drama teachers, and they were crying out for really good quality CPD. So that's what we were trying to provide, and also what we were doing is then kind of embedding our work back into this secondary system. So that's kind of still ongoing. And then we thought, well, if they want us to do masks again, everyone's going, when are you going to do your masks again? And we've been working for 5 years with this really important work on text. Well, why don't we create this? So that's what we created. So we created a half mask set. So now, a lot of our work, most of our work, is with our half masks. And these have become incredibly successful. And in a way, it kind of it is that journey. And kind of, if we could see it 5 years before, it would have been great. But you have to maybe go through on that journey to find it. And what's great about these is that we can combine all of that kind of methodology of our mask work with all of that fantastic research we've done around Indian theatre, Sanskrit theatre, and African theatre, all those kind of fantastic movement cultures that we've been working on, and put them into this, where you can use text and mask together. So that's basically where we are with Trestle. I'll maybe talk and answer some questions a bit more. So I was then made redundant, because obviously we couldn't afford someone with my huge wages. And I very briefly, last year, was the Creative Learning Manager at Cambridge Junction, which was a different kind of departure for me, and I have a speciality in creative learning, so it was okay, but I kind of knew it was quite short term. One thing I did learn there massively was about apprenticeships, because they run an apprenticeship scheme, so I've now become kind of an expert on apprenticeships, which is great, and the whole kind of cultural program. And then, through circumstances, I decided that I needed another job. I had a baby, my girlfriend had a baby, and we needed to kind of look at things, and this job at TWorks came up, and through personal circumstances and also my kind of real passion for socially engaged arts, I decided to go for that, and this is where I am now. I've been at TWorks for 2 months, and it's a massive departure for me from theatre, because I've basically been doing theatre for over 20 years. But the skills I'm sort of using now as a director are all those skills I think that I've learned from very, very early on, from the time I was in Belfast through especially working at Theatre World Plymouth, working at Trestle, being a creative learning director. I suppose those leadership skills really, and those management skills, and that passion for creativity. And so TWorks is a company. We're based in Radstock, although our work mainly takes place around Baines, but further afield as well. And we deliver courses and projects in socially engaged art, with a focus on health and well-being. So we work a lot with people with mental health issues. For example, we have an ongoing program called My Time, My Space, which works with women with postnatal depression. We're soon to be venturing into working with elders and in the dementia settings. So we develop and deliver all of this work, and part of that, the sort of unique quality of our work is our progression. So what we do is that we initially start these courses and these projects, and the artists and the participants are on a sort of level playing field. And it's very much the participants who decide which journey, where they want to take the artistic and creative process. We then support them to become their own companies, their own sort of artistic collectives. Very successful. There's a few who have been winning awards all over the place. They're incredibly successful. We help them to progress so that then they're peer-led artistic groups. Some of those people then we bring back and train in our artist development program to be the artists who work with the next sort of generation and the next lot. So it's a circular, it's a wheel, and it's incredibly, it has a very sustainable and massive kind of progression avenues for all of the participants. I suppose why they probably brought me in rather than anyone else is my expertise in training and in sort of training of actors and others. So I'm very much looking forward to develop our co-create, which is our artist training, and looking at creating, getting CPD accredited, maybe working with the higher education, so with universities. We happen to be, it's a company that I have to say that I'd heard of now and then, didn't really know what they did. I have a feeling people in Baines might not know exactly who they are, but they're an incredible company. So we are an incredible company. They do amazing work. They really punch above their weight. And brilliantly, they're only one of 2 national portfolio organisations that are funded by the Arts Council in Baines. So I think that shows you kind of what level that they're seen by the Arts Council as well. Who now I have a fantastic relationship with. So that's kind of my story up to now. I hope that wasn't too long or boring. I'd be very happy to answer any questions whatsoever, especially about Trestle, if that's more what you're interested in.
Does anyone have a question?
I wonder if you could talk a bit more about your time in Paris. I mean, I know that there's a lot of kind of Lecoq work and good in Paris. How did you get there? Why did they pick the British actor?
Because it's funny. I mean, I stupidly, one of the worst decisions of my life, but I think that you make these decisions. I got a place at Lecoq and decided to go to a British drama school instead. And I also wish I'd gone to Lecoq. But the reason I went to Paris was, I got a job there. There's a couple of English-speaking theatre companies who have been there for years and years and years. And I just kind of saw an advert, went for the audition, and thought, God, this would be nice to live in Paris for 6 months and, you know, tour around. And so I went over and I did that, and I loved Paris so much. I was very lucky to do a TV series straight afterwards. And that gave me quite a bit of money to be able to stay there. And then I got into the whole voiceovers. So it's a massive centre for voiceovers, because all of the European films...
Doing British voiceovers or
yeah.
French?
No, doing English voiceovers. Yeah, exactly. So all of the European films come into Paris, they get dubbed and they go off to America, basically. That's the kind of pipeline. So there's huge opportunities and a fantastic community of actors and directors there. But at that stage in my career, I didn't really have anything to do with the kind of the work that I was going to get onto in physical theatre and le coq. I wish I had, in a way. The only one sort of thing I've always heard of Peter Brook, and so I went to see quite a few of his shows at the Bouffe du Nord, which is his theatre, and was kind of blown away by them. And then, very fortunately, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I did some training with him, which is some of the most incredible 2 days of my life, really, working with a genuine genius, who was actually just doing really simple games. Is that it? But it was actually the way he did it, and then we'd all sit round in a circle in silence, and he would just go, I think you just need to be silent now and then, don't you? And then I spoke to him about this thing called Johar Q. Do you know, has anyone heard of the thing called Johar Q? So the year before that, I trained with Yoshi Aida. So Yoshi has worked with Peter Brook for about 40 years. He's a genius of a man, right? And he teaches this thing called Johar Q, which is a Japanese rhythm of life, and it's been used for centuries within theatre and art and no theatre and that sort of stuff. And it's very simply, it's a kind of our way of expressing it would be beginning, middle, and end. But it's much more than that. It's about a start, a progression, and then a climax. And you have a moment of Johar Q. You can have a moment just within an action, and the whole show should have a Johar Q. So the whole thing is a structure, and it comes from life, and it comes actually from a sexual act. And it was quite bizarre, because I went up to Peter afterwards and had a kind of a half-hour conversation with him about Johar Q. And his final words, I won't repeat them here because they were too rude, but he explained the sexual act to me in terms of Johar Q, and I just thought it was one of the most extraordinary moments of my life. This genius of a man just kind of taken down to the basics, but that's what it is, and that's what someone like him is so brilliant about, because he said it's all about sex. It's not all about sex, but rhythm. It's what he was trying to get across to me was that it's about being a human being, and that's what Yoshi does. It's about this understanding. For example, I won't do this with you now, but if you were to ask a group of people, if I were to ask you now, I won't do it just in case it goes wrong, I won't, to clap together, what you would do is you would kind of start a bit, and then you would get into it, and that's the joke. There would be a start. You would then go into it, and it would accelerate, and it would accelerate until it's finished, and that's the ha and the Q, and it'll happen. Try any group, and it'll happen, and it's just because of the human rhythm. It just happens all the time. So I went off a little bit on Peter Brook, but he was kind of one of the great people in Paris that I think gives it such an amazing place to be.
I recently auditioned for the National Youth Theatre.
Yes.
I was just wondering what they're looking for.
Aha, what they're looking for. Okay, so the National Youth Theatre, a company very, very close to my heart. I was very lucky. Last year I just went to, I delivered the first ever theatre participation project in Saudi Arabia for the National Youth Theatre. And they're going off and doing loads and loads of work in Saudi Arabia, which is fantastic. And one of the best things that they said was, we'll only do this with the men if we can come back and work with the women, because obviously they're so this year we're going off and doing loads of different stuff. But what are they looking for? They're looking for talent, raw talent. I do loads of the auditions, so I can kind of tell you what I'm looking for, really. Someone who's not over-prepared. You have to prepare, but someone who's not just kind of this I've done, looked in the mirror, that's how we like to describe it, who's not kind of rehearsed it in the mirror. And also, the National Youth Theatre itself looks for personality. So it looks for some, it's an ensemble company. That's what it is. Artistically, it's an ensemble. That's how it works. It's one of the few companies left, I suppose, in the world who can actually do shows with 40, 50 people on stage. You know, so you have to be part of an ensemble. So they're really looking for people who can work with each other, people who've got a passion, people who are doing it for the right reasons, which might not necessarily be to be an actor. But I would, if there's any advice, it's the same, I think, get from the National Youth Theatre to go to drama school, whatever, is be true to yourself. So I made a mistake when I auditioned for one drama school, I remember, where I asked a friend of mine, who was my director at the National Youth Theatre, to direct me in this, on this piece. And he said, "Are you sure this is the right piece?" I said, yeah. And it was a sort of a 70-year-old. How on earth could I ever show what I can do as an 18-year-old when I'm doing something? You can kind of see age, but you have to put on the voice. It's just not true. So try and be true to yourself. Do stuff, if you're going to do some speeches, do the speeches that you would actually play. You know, do Romeo or do something, you know, something that you've got a real feeling to and a connection to. And then, have you been to the audition yet?
Yes, it was not last Friday, the Friday.
Oh, okay. So this is kind of, yeah, I should have given the advice beforehand. But and then in the sessions where they have all the kind of the physical sessions and that's what they're looking for there is just people who will listen, react, respond, and work with each other. It's so much about working with each other. All my closest friends are still from the National Youth Theatre when I was in it 30 odd years ago. Some are now incredibly famous. Daniel Craig, who's a mate of mine who was in the National Youth Theatre with. Others, one of them is marketing director for a veterinary surgery in Bath. You know, we were all together in the same shows, and we're still mates because it's about an ethos of the National Youth Theatre, and you have to be able to kind of fit into that ethos. It's not particularly about being the best actor. It helps. Yeah, but I'm sure you'd have done well. Yes.
A fascinating career. I just wanted to ask, do you think if you were starting now, well, put it this way, you've had your run-ins with the Arts Council and with, how should I say, arts bureaucracy in the arts establishment, and the situation when you started your career, the context in which you started your career is very different from the context that the theatre works in now. So if you were starting now, do you think you would follow that same career now? Or would, if you were starting now, knowing what you did then, would you steer a different route?
That's a really interesting question. I ask myself that almost every day because I don't know about myself, but I think one of my both strengths and weaknesses is that I'm quite good at a few things. So I can act, but I can also direct. I can also be a creative learning manager and a practitioner and an arts manager. And I think, in a way, if I was to do it again, I might have just stuck to one of those things. And probably I would be. I think it's much easier to be a theatre director now than it was then.
Why?
Because there's a lot more support. Because companies realise, and there's a lot more awards and things, and even courses. When I was starting out, it was very difficult to do a theatre directing course, an MA in theatre directing. It just didn't really exist. The kind of route to being a director was Oxbridge. And as much as that quite similar now, it wasn't, the talk was 20 years ago now, 20 years. And I think now that there are far more networks. I think in theatre generally, and things like this, there are a lot more kind of networks, a lot more support. I think it might be more difficult to get to the top. Well, then it's always been difficult to get to the top. But I think that there are more open avenues. I think in that way it's easier. I think that people have kind of been there and started to kind of create those journeys and those jobs really. There are associate director jobs, there are assistant director jobs, there are these networks. I'm not saying in any way that it's easy at all. I mean, being a director or an actor is the stupidest thing you could ever think of doing. And everyone who says only do it if you can't do anything else is absolutely right. But I mean, if you're talking about funding-wise, I think that it was a hell of a lot easier then. I mean, it was just, I don't think people even really thought that much about it because there was so much kind of local authority funding, let alone anything else. It was like cinemas, and there was cinemas everywhere. Now there are no cinemas apart from the multiplex. It's gone. The landscape, as you rightly say, has changed massively. But whether I would take a different course, I'm really not sure, because I think the course I've taken is I've kind of, do you know that poem, the Robert Frost poem, is it The Road Not Taken? One of my favourite poems, because it's just, that's it, you've got two options, you either go one way or the other, and I think once you've gone one way, don't bother looking back, and just kind of go to the next bit, the next bit, the next bit, and that's how I've kind of tried to do it. It does mean maybe that I haven't fulfilled some of my ambition as an actor or a director, but I've had a very, very interesting time up to now. So I think I wouldn't be able to answer your question about whether I do it differently, but I think that's probably the one thing I do, is start my directing career much earlier, because I think it takes a long time to mature into being a theatre director.
I've got a quick question. Kind of when Trestle lost their funding, how did they have to kind of adapt to survive?
Oh, it was bloodshed. It was horrible actually. We had to make half of the company redundant, and there was a massive fight basically between the artistic side of the company and the management side of the company. And the artistic director was obviously going to stay, and then it was whether we keep the company as an artistic body and grow from there, or whether we keep it as a sort of, we keep the company managed and just outsource all of our art. And the artists won the case, but basically that's what we had to do. We had to completely redefine what the company was. We had to make loads of redundancies. We had to refocus on our, as I say, on our other work, and then we had to start looking for different income sources, because Trestle itself is actually, it's a company, but it also runs an art centre. And the arts, this is another fantastic thing that the Arts Council did. They gave us loads of money to do up this fantastic art centre in St Albans, but gave us no money to run it. And so when they cut the budget, we were left with this building that, if we were to say, well, we don't want it anymore, we'd have had to pay back the £16 million that they gave us to do it. So we couldn't fold, because we had this building around our necks that we had to do something with. So we turned it into a much more of a kind of community art centre, and doing gigs and lots of different stuff. And the company is now surviving. It's pretty well. Mainly on these, it makes a lot of money on its master sales, and I'd say anyone can come up with anything as genius as a Trestle mask to fund a theatre company, then do it, because these basically fund Trestle Theatre Company. It's extraordinary, after 32 years, how many of these fly out the door every single day all around the world. It's just extraordinary, because you think there might be a kind of fine art, everyone's got them, especially as they're really well built, so you don't break them very much. But they go all around the world, and especially now that we've got the new ones. And that funds most of our work. That and our education work. So for example, I'm doing tomorrow a day's inset for Hampshire County Council for all of their drama teachers. So obviously that's a good income earning. So yeah, diversifying income streams is the way we did it, which is very Arts Council now, isn't it? Diversifying income streams. It's what we're doing at Creativity Works. Diversifying income streams. I never thought I'd say that when I was in the bars of Paris 20 years ago.
Does anyone else have any questions? Ian?
Well, kind of going on from income streams, do you foresee a way that Trestle could ever start touring again? Is there kind of a business model outside of sort of full-time Arts Council funding that allows for it?
I think the only way they would do it, and I think what they are going to do, is to do it in collaboration and in partnership. So they did a show with Unicorn Theatre called The Snow Queen, where they basically did the physical side of the show, and there was some mask in it as well. But so we kind of got paid for doing that. And then actually they then took it on because we could have a really good contacts in India, and we then took that show ourselves around India through the British Council. I think there are ways. I think it has to be in collaboration. They're doing another show at the moment, Romeo and Juliet, with something called concert theatre, who basically combine classical music and theatre. So it can be classical music and masked version of Romeo and Juliet. I don't know how that's going to look. But, they're also working with York Theatre Royal on a brand new scheme of working with masks in communities and creating kind of community productions. So I think that's the way to do it. It's kind of looking at what projects are going on. So Theatre Royal, York got loads and loads of money to kind of to create these big community projects. So we kind of went for some of that money. So I think that for Trestle, that's really the only way. The only other way to do that is to go for one of the other Arts Council funds, so to go for a grant for the arts. But I can't remember how much you would have. You'll know.
100,000.
How much?
100,000 is the top.
For gift, is it?
Yeah.
They're actually brackets.
Right. So they probably could go for that kind of money, but the trouble now, in a way, with Trestle is that you have to sustain your audience, and they almost have to start again and build up. So that's the thing. What they're trying to do at the moment is just to really work in collaboration, and then to work with people around the kind of skills. So we do a lot of work with the RSC on their movement skills and working in mask with them. And I think that's kind of the way. But whether there'll be another touring show, I hope there will be. I'd love them to be, but they're not, for example, going for NPO funding this time round. They wouldn't be able to do it. So it's an interesting thing because there's a company called Vermos. Now Vermos are run by Rachel Savage, who used to work for Trestle and is now basically doing Trestle shows, but with Vermos. So there's someone kind of there doing it already and doing it very, very well. She's a brilliant practitioner, director. So I think they'll take a bit of time to find what their niche is, especially if they do go back to touring. I'm not quite sure. Hopefully it'll be a half mask show, but it'll be small scale. It'll be probably something in rural arts or something like that. So kind of almost going right back to their roots, probably.
Could I just say something around touring, as I have to put my hand up as an ex-Trestle performer behind those masks many, many years ago. The circuit that we used to tour just doesn't exist anymore. We used to do art centres and theatres, and you would tour a lot on a circuit, and each year Trestle would go back with a show, and the audience would build, and they would know your work. Those art centres and those theatres simply don't exist or anymore, or they don't do that kind of programming. So developing maybe on a very, very small scale, but these are very long-term kind of projects and ambitions in terms of building an audience for mask work. And once those things have gone, I think that's the tragedy about what's happened around the arts infrastructure. That over the years it's been death by 1,000 cuts, and I know the people that program those theatres now. It's sound of the silver 60s and a bit of wrestling and a bit of comedy to make you money, and maybe there's a pantomime at Christmas, but the interesting stuff that would get people engaged, they haven't got the money to program that kind of thing anymore. So it's not just about the, to use that horrible modern word, the product that you offer, but how is it going to be sold and who's going to sell it on for you? I do think there is something in the rural touring circuit, and making that notion of poor theatre and doing it with just or everything you can get it in the back of a van and just turn up and do it. And I think that gives the performances a certain kind of immediacy and presence. But certainly the kind of shows that Trestle used to do that depended on the careful staging and lighting, I just don't think that's possible anymore.
No, I agree. And I think what's really changed as well, which is so sad to see, is that there's no joined up overall government policies and thinking. So, education and the art, it should be so joined up thinking, and it's not. And Trestle is still on the syllabus. So, that's what we still do hundreds and hundreds of mask workshops, because that is part of the syllabus. And they keep saying to us, oh, so when can we come and see you? And so you come and done this workshop, where can we see your work? So you can't, because there isn't anywhere we can do it. And if we were to do it, it would probably be a whole school's audience, and we just don't want to do that and go back and being TIE. So it's such a difficult balance to make, isn't it? It really is. But I would love to see that kind of, all those companies that people in the education think are so important in British theatre. Well, why don't you then support them so that the young people who are actually learning our skills can then develop and progress by seeing our work, and maybe, it's not joined up at all, unfortunately.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Do you think there's a snobbery around socially engaged practice?
Oh, that's a really good question. And gosh, am I allowed to say I've only been doing this job for 2 months? I'm not sure. But I think there might be, but I think the problem is that I'm not sure people understand it. I think that's the problem. I think people don't quite understand what it genuinely is, and also the absolute genuine quality of the work that's produced. And I think that people come here, socially engaged arts, or working with people with mental health, and they kind of go, oh, well done. Yeah. That's nice, yeah, well done. I mean, I think even my own family kind of went, oh, right. And now they kind of, I've told them about it, they see it and they go, God, that's incredible. And, oh, by the way, we've just done another award. Yeah, we won 3 awards last year. We've just been nominated for another 2 awards. And you look actually at policy, and people are talking about what's happening within mental health and well-being and dementia and stuff. And socially engaged arts, for me, is the place where people are starting to join up those areas, especially within education, health, well-being, the arts, culture. That's the kind of forum where it's really happening. So for me, I think it's absolutely vital part of kind of the future of our society. But I think it will take a lot of, not education, that's a patronising word, but I think advocacy maybe is the right word, to just let people know that this kind of work is there, and that people can get involved in it, and also the quality is really quite brilliant.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned the sort of the way that works. I mean, based on the kind of No Boundaries conference we went to in Bristol last week, there was a lady from the Lowry that was kind of talking about all the work they're doing, and a lot of their outreach work is kind of being embedded into social services and things like that, which is kind of the way that sort of arts companies seem to be having to go to survive, is by actually embedding art within culture itself. So
I mean, I think that's great that Lowry doing some brilliant work, and I think it will go that way. I mean, I think we're overtly saying that's what we do, especially within health and well-being, because we're creating consortia which are going for very big sets of bit of public money within commissions, because the whole of, I don't know if you know, Baines within arts development and also within health has gone to a commissioning way of funding. So we have to get those commissions, otherwise we won't survive. But what's great is that they are, at least those commissioners are seeing the value of creativity, and I think that's the key to it. And I think that's what we need to kind of shout out more. That Baines has actually been really forward-thinking in a lot of their commissions, being part of it being that we're part of that those consortia, because they are bringing creativity into those kind of areas.
I think if anyone else has any more questions, I mean, Oliver will hang around for a little bit.
Yes,
I'm sure
please do.
he's happy for you to come and chat to him sort of in the bar afterwards. Martin, would you like to come up and say a brief bit about the cultural forum, or say it from there if you like? It's entirely up to you.
Just say, I'm Martin, I'm the director for the cultural forum for the Bath area. For anyone who don't know me or the work of the cultural forum, we're an arts partnership organisation, arts and culture, because we take in museums, galleries, performing arts, visual arts. It's anything to do with culture. We even have sporting organisations in there as well. You take culture to be what you do outside work. I'm so very happy to support tonight and support the work of Luke and Theatre Bath. And I was really, I'm afraid I couldn't make your conference last October, but I heard how successful that was. And I'd be very, very interested in supporting the development of Theatre Bath and supporting the work of the conference. And making sure that people are more networked and joined up and are aware of everything that's going on in Bath, because it is a place that is full of creativity. A lot of it's kind of hidden away, tucked away. And what I'd be very interested in doing is, obviously you're here tonight because you're very interested in theatre, but actually you share a lot of concerns and interests and enthusiasms with other creative artists in music or dance or whatever. So I'd be interested in talking with Luke and finding out how we can integrate you into the larger artistic community here, and how people can learn from you and that you can learn from others, because I think you have a shared agenda in wanting to look at creativity and how it can be, how others can benefit from it and how you can benefit from it, because I know, as I said, I started off as an actor, now unfortunately not, but I've had my greatest ups and downs as an actor. I know just how fulfilling it can be to be involved in that marvellous team process that is theatre. So I wish you all the luck with your theatre making, and Luke will keep me in touch with things that are going in here, and I hope to invite you to other Cultural Forum events. Theatre Bath is a member of the Cultural Forum. Luke sits on our executive group, as does Ollie, actually, as well. So we'll keep you apprised of things and trainings that we're doing. It's mostly aimed at organisations as opposed to individual artists, but do take a look at the website, Cultural Forum Bath area, and you can sign up there to our free newsletter, and of course, follow us on Twitter.
Martin, is it April to April, the membership?
It is.
Okay.
It is yes. It's to join. It's £10 for individuals, £25 for organisations with no paid or professional staff, and £50 for what they might call the larger organisations. But you can follow us on Twitter. You can sign up to the emails for nothing, and just keep an eye on what we're doing.
Lovely. I think if we could all join together and just give a round of applause.